Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today has been an Amazon seller for 2 decades. He's the co-founder of PNW Brands. He's built several brands before. He owns multiple brands in multiple categories. And outside of work, he has an interesting focus in his travels that he likes very much. He likes traveling with focus on archaeological trips. So, but he loves to work. So that's his main interest area. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Alan Blackford. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thanks for having me here, Nick.
You know, archaeological trips, they are very interesting, except that if you go to these hot countries, you know, very hot and humid, and then you go to these sites, they get very uncomfortable because I've done it a couple of times. So it's a good hobby. So tell us, obviously you have a playbook. So you've built several brands. You have multiple brands in multiple categories. So you know what to do, you know how to do it. So you just basically rinse and repeat, so to speak. But it's not as simple as that. So you got certain guiding principles. So tell us your formula for success.
Yeah, for us, it's micro categories.
So define what is a micro category.
Well, a micro category to us is a small Amazon category for the Amazon nerds, maybe down to what we call a browse node.
Okay, so you're talking about, when you go to the, of course, you can select the category from the drop-down, but if you go to Amazon bestsellers page, Amazon/GP/bestsellers, you can see the full category list there. And then when you click on it, it opens up another tier right under it. And then you click on another one, opens up another tier, and you can go as deep as 5 layers. So in your definition, what layer does a micro category fit in?
The very last one.
5th one.
If you go to the browse tree guide, it's the last section on the browse tree guide. So yeah, we go clear down to the bottom.
Okay. So give us your primary reason why you want to go into that micro category.
Yeah, so for us, one of the things that we decided early on was we didn't want to be one of those Amazon sellers that just picked a lot of random items that they could get some good margin on and start throwing those out there to the ecosphere, right? That just wasn't us. We wanted to actually find a way to help service consumers. And if you go into these micro categories, universally, you will find that they are underserved. And that is something that we like. So instead of providing a single item to a customer, this is how you really get to that point where you can say, how do I provide an entire solution to the customer? How can I make this beautiful brand inside of a category that's underserved and make that defensible, right? Make it exciting for that small category and really like own that category, like go in there and like overwhelm the category.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. There is actually a principle. It's a funny story, but I read this a long time ago. It's called the Zulu principle. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay, so it's a funny approach, but it's absolutely legit. So if you watch a documentary about the Zulu nation, suddenly you become the expert in your neighborhood about the Zulu nation. If you actually spend a little extra time to buy a few books and read about the Zulus, you spend the Zulu expert in your town. If you want to have a little bit of free time and take a week and an extra cash and take a week and spend a week in Zulu land, you become the Zulu expert in the world. So that's what you're talking about. Like you are applying the Zulu principle.
Nick, that's literally spot on. It's the perfect principle for what we do, because what happens is nobody spends the time to become an expert in some of these small categories. And when you do, that gives you this opportunity to innovate. So in some of our categories, we've created products that didn't even exist, which is super fun and a little bit risky at times. But some of those have proven to be the very best products that we've ever sold, are products that didn't exist in the category. But to do that, you have to do exactly what you just said. So it's one thing to go look into the micro category on Amazon. It's another thing to get out and start studying it. Spend time on Google and YouTube and do that research and talk to experts in that particular area and figure out, like, what is it that they really need? And a lot of times what you'll find is in the little categories, all the pieces are sort of floating around everywhere. Some of them aren't even in Amazon, to be frank. Most of them, of the really good ones, aren't. A lot of the niche little categories, those sellers aren't on Amazon. So what you do is you end up taking all these little pieces and you bring them together, right? You bring them together for the consumer and you put together bundles and packages and help them to not have to go look for every little piece that they need to accomplish the chore, the project, the task that they're trying to get done. And that's the beauty of micro categories. You can genuinely put together solutions for customers that just can't be done in a giant category like electronics or home furnishings or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, I want to understand the methodology. So we are drilling down to that fifth layer of the category, and you are going to have a limited number of products there. So what are you looking for? Are you looking for products there already selling, but you feel you can create a better product? Or are you looking for gaps where there are no products in that category? Which one is your methodology?
Generally, it's a little bit of both, probably the former rather than the latter, because a lot of times what you'll see, my favorite thing when you go into one of these micro categories, the favorite thing to look for is look at the top 5 selling items, like start there, right? Go to the top 50, top 100. Sometimes there's not, one of the categories we're in right now doesn't even have 100 in the top 100. There was only 88. So that's how small the category is, right? But if you look at the top 5, my favorite thing to look for is look at the branding and the packaging and the detail page. And if it looks like it was developed in the 80s or 90s, the packaging, and it looks almost yellowed and old, that's the category we like to go into. The uglier the products, the better that it's going to be. But yeah, a lot of times, keep in mind we're the manufacturer. So that does make things a little different. While we do order some components from overseas, or here in the US, we source a lot of stuff here domestically as well. We do start by looking at some of our base understanding, right? So we are really good at making waxes and oils and those sorts of combinations. So we certainly are looking in categories that do that. So a lot of times we'll look at those top products and go, okay, how are they formulating? And are they actually using safe products? Is this actually or is this an old product that's got all kinds of chemicals and things in it, right? So some of that can be an opportunity to develop something that the same purpose, but developed differently, right? In safer ways and so forth. But then also gaps. And that's where the studying, if we find a few products inside there that look interesting, that's when we head out to Google. That's when we head out to YouTube. That's when we head out to experts and start trying to figure out, are there actually gaps in here that we could help fill? And we've always found gaps, always, in the micro categories.
Yeah. I mean, because by default, micro category is less populated, and therefore it has a lot more room for you to fill. So how about your forecasting? Because one thing you can do is you go do the keyword search, and then whatever comes up under that keyword search, you have a pretty good idea about the market size. So in this case, when it's small, aren't you afraid of it's much smaller market?
We love smaller markets, so not afraid of it at all. Because part of the key here is we don't go into one micro category, right? We go into multiple. But the first thing I would say is obviously there's tools out there that you can see what the volume is of the top sellers. So a lot of times we'll take probably the easiest math I would do is I would take the top 5 to 10 sellers in a micro category, and I would look at what are their monthly sales. And I say to myself, would I be happy with a single item doing monthly sales in that range? And so the category I mentioned earlier, I didn't tell you what it was, but that category that has only 88 items in them, the number one seller does $55,000 a month in sales with one item that looks absolutely horrible. And it just blows my mind that they're doing that, right? And so then you look at the next ones and you're like, okay, well, number 2 is doing 40, number 3, 4, and 5 are doing 30 to 25. I'm like, if I had an item doing $25,000 to $50,000 a month, would I be happy with that? Absolutely. I'd be thrilled with that, right? And then you look down the rest of the list and you're like, great, we're launching 12 products in a category that only had 88 to begin with, right? Our goal is we just want one product to be in the top 5. That's it. Because if we get one product in the top 5 and you're doing $250,000, $500,000 a year on a single product, that's an all-out win for us, right? And if you've got 5 or 6 categories that you're in, micro categories can be terrific. And the beauty is you are providing like a real value to the consumer. Make no mistake, it's really hard, by the way. It's really hard to do that, to put together a set of products for a category. But the harder it is, the more excited we get about it because nobody else is going to want to do it. And we like that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that narrow definition of the audience. And I mean, that drives everything, because now you bring crystal clear focus on keywords that you want, and your conversion rates are going to be much higher than usual. So it's definitely, I heard you say launch 12 products. So when you find those several, why not combine all the advantages you have into one product rather than launch multiple?
Well, because on a single category, they need multiple products in these micro categories. I'm going to tell you one of the categories we're in, right? So we launched in baseball glove care. Okay. So a baseball glove, you're thinking, who spends time thinking about baseball glove care? It's actually mitt treatment is the category. Like, who spends time on a category that tiny, right? It's exciting because I'm not a baseball player. I had to learn all kinds of things about baseball. I've never played a game of baseball in my life, right? I'm a nerd. I didn't do that kind of stuff, right? And so I've learned about like baseball mallets, right? To soften the glove. And then you need a cleaner to clean your glove from the debris in the field. And you need oil to loosen the leather fibers, and a conditioner to protect it from that, and a wrap to wrap it around to shape the glove to create that pocket. And suddenly we've got a dozen products and a whole bunch of bundles, right? It's like, oh, if you got a brand new glove, you need this. If you've got an old glove that's beat to crap, this is the kit that you need, right? And that's the stuff that we get excited about, because it's like, we can go into a category and just provide just these great solutions that makes it easy for the consumer. And they can't get that today. You'll have one seller that sells one of those items, and then maybe the mallets by 10 Chinese sellers. And it's like, no, these, people that play baseball, they want answers, right? And we're even going to launch, we haven't done it yet, but we're going to launch an entire team pack. So if you've got a little league team or whatever, and you need to outfit all the kids with their gear, we're going to do a giant bundle just to make it easier for the consumer to purchase. But yeah, It's a tiny category, and but you can make it really special and really, really great. And that's what we've had success in the past doing exactly that with our prior brands.
Okay, so I hear you now. It's more clear. So what you are doing is you are first heading into that micro category and you're looking at all the items there, and you're looking at items that are really not looking as competitive as you would want to make it. But you're not looking at just one or two for you to take on. You are looking at, okay, what has room in this particular space, and fill it with new products. One has nothing to do with the other. You're creating a number of items, and then from that you are bundling them up, and that's another listing and another listing. That's a great strategy. It's to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I wish it was completely a no-brainer, but there's work to that no-brainer. But yes, I mean, it does make sense, but it takes a lot of dedication to go into a category and think that way. Most people think of products, like individual products when they go on Amazon. We do not think that way at all. We think about these micro categories. That's how we think. We want to provide solutions for the whole category, not just a single item inside of that category.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's the strategy is a great strategy. So how do you test this? What is your way of testing before you go into a whole production and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is simply experience, right? So we know the metrics on prior micro categories that we've been engaged in. So we look at, where are these top sellers? How are they ranked? What is, where are they at in terms of sales and so forth? And we have a pretty good mathematical sense around where we'll be about 12 months from when we enter the category. So in 12 months, each micro category that we go into, we actually establish goals and say, okay, in this category, we expect to have products in these positions based on the offerings that we're going to create in 12 months. And we track to that to see how we're doing. And, again, history is a pretty good indicator of success moving forward for us. And so we just use the same metrics that we've used in the past, and those seem to play out. But really, you have to be confident in what you're going to bring to that category. And you have to be confident that the competition is as weak as it's viewed as. And there's lots of great tools out there, as we know, to get that data to make those decisions.
So share with us some of the metrics that you use to track your success.
Well, for us, obviously, the top line sales is the key metric, right? But honestly, looking at how the consumers engage in terms of both reviews and in terms of emails and communications to us, that's critical, because if they love our products, everything else will take care of itself. We know that, and we'll be as good as we can be in that micro category if they really love the products. We've had some great feedback from customers over the years, and we've changed course, like in some categories completely, because of feedback that we've gotten. Not that our products were bad, it's just they had better ideas. And sometimes we would completely navigate that. So having, looking at feedback and using that as a metric, I think, is critically important. And we all love to hate reviews, but, we just do. However, there are nuggets inside all of those reviews. There's obviously a ton of them that we all hate. They're bogus, they're garbage reviews, but there's some sweet little nuggets in each one of those. And if you really read those and pay attention to those, you'll find them. And in fact, by the way, that's one of the number one things we do when we go into micro categories. You read all the reviews on all the products. And why do you do that? Because you'll find all the weaknesses in that category. And so that is just like gold to us, right? It's like, oh, everybody hates all these mallets because they're made in two different pieces. It's like, well, we can fix that, right? Everybody hates this because it's too small of a size, or it leaks, or it's whatever, right? And so that's another thing we discover. So, but obviously we look at feedback. Sales are critically important, and also the price point. So On Amazon, of course, when you're dealing FBA, which is mostly what we're doing, you got to have the right price point. And if the entire category is like a $7 to $10 price point, that's not really for us, right? Especially on the manufacturing side. We're always looking for stuff that's in that, we're kind of in the $20 to $50 range, which is a little low for some people, but for us, that's like the sweet spot. So our base items are normally like, $16 to $20, and then our bundles will go from $30 to $80 or something like that for bundles of our products. And we like having just a nice mix of that. So you do want to look at the category to make sure that it's going to support that price point. And that's critical. Then the other thing, of course, is margins. So what are they charging? We know how to configure what our costs are going to look like. Does this category support the margins that we're going to need to be successful? So there's obviously more than just sales. There's a lot of underlying pieces we're looking at as well.
Yeah. And what is a good margin usually you shoot for?
Depends which margin you're asking about. Everybody
Yeah,
defines
well,
margin differently.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. So let's break it down. So give me your take. So when I work with clients, typically I look at how much you intend to sell it for and how much you're buying it for. So that one is the gross margin. So in your case, what is a good gross margin for you?
Yeah, again, tough question. We're the manufacturer. So I would answer that a couple different ways. Typically, when I think of what would be the equivalent of landed cost, even though that we're the manufacturer, I'm looking at 4 to 5x from cost to good, from landed cost to retail. That's sort of our sweet spot there. Maybe at a higher level, it's easier because there's so much complexity when you're a manufacturer combined with e-commerce. I would say that maybe the best way to think of it is we are always shooting for an EBITDA or SDE in the mid to upper 20s. And so we need products that support that. And it's tricky because you have to balance not just the raw costs and so forth, but the manufacturing side. You have to think about like how much do you have to store in raw goods and all of that, and the actual labor associated with that. We do put the labor into the product cost to help us get close to landed costs, but it's never the same. So yeah, that's kind of our model, right?
Okay, so yeah, when you're manufacturing, you're not buying the item, you are making it. And of course, in order to make it, you have to buy the raw materials, and then you have the labor and everything else. Plus, there is often like wasted stuff, damaged stuff because the production process is not 100% always.
We've never made a mistake in production. I don't know what you're talking about, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff, depending on what it is, it's the fact of life. So you almost have to be running two companies if you are also selling, right? So one company makes it, the other one sells it.
Yeah, and we don't separate those. At least currently, we don't separate those. But yes, it is very much you're running two sets of inventories, two different. The word production and logistics means something entirely different depending on which lens you're looking at it through. But no, you're exactly right. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was literally at the warehouse yesterday, and I am not a production guy, right? But right now, when you're in startup, you do whatever you have to do. So I was filling bottles of oil yesterday and found out that if you drip the oil onto this, we have this bottle that's made of like 30% wheatgrass. Who would have thought, right? And so instead of all plastic, it's got this wheatgrass in it. Well, if you drip the oil on the bottle and it runs onto the pre-printed lettering on it, and then you go to wipe it up, it smears the lettering, right? Well, I wasn't the greatest at filling some of those. So we definitely lost some bottles yesterday due to imperfect production. So yes, you are correct. Sometimes that happens.
Well, this opens an interesting subject. Using co-packers. I have a client that uses co-packers. So they do these kits, cooking kits, and they buy spices, but these are special spices and mixes and grains and things like that from all over the world. Well, guess what? They buy them in big containers, get them shipped to the co-packer. And now, as far as the merchandise arrives, it's in stock. It goes on the balance sheet, right? It's inventory. So now they say to the co-packer, okay, make up 12,000 packets of this spice, 12,000 packets of that spice. Well, I wonder how that translation of that big container into those 12,000 packets, right? There is, God knows what is left in between. And guess what? That's your also part of your margin. Has to be taken into account.
Well, we love that problem. And the reason is we all know that there's only one mistake you can make on Amazon that will take you out of business, and that's being out of stock. It is the death knell for every Amazon seller. You run out of stock, it is a nightmare to recover from. As the manufacturer and doing some of that sort of co-packing ourselves, right? We love it. Number one, because our raw ingredients, first of all, work for a lot of individual products. And we have this mindset, you can only imagine. So I am super fastidious about inventory. I love doing inventory analysis and so forth. And our goal has always been, we're going to always have at least 2 months of inventory at Amazon and 2 months of inventory at the warehouse ready to ship, and 6 months of inventory worth of raw goods ready to produce at all times. We never, ever have less than 10 months supply of all of our stuff. Now, we don't know what the mix of that's going to be, to your point. We don't know if, pet products or baseball products or leather products, which one's going to sell more, but it doesn't matter. We have the raw goods to make sure that we can balance that and put that together as needed. Being the manufacturer is a huge advantage in the US, huge advantage, because we don't have to worry about staging finished goods all over the place. We just need a modest amount at our location, a couple of months worth, and then the raw goods, and we can control the manufacturing to make that supply chain like as tight as can be. And if there's a problem at the port, sorry, guys, that's tough for you, but we're going to be fine. It can take 6 or 8 months to figure it out before we're in a problem. And if it takes more than 6 or 8 months, there's a lot bigger problems than Amazon FBA at that point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's true. It all comes down to planning it. The other thing that presents here, another challenge is it really puts pressure on the margins. And if you are carrying raw goods worth 10 months, your operation needs to finance that. And in order for the operation to finance, it needs to have enough margin. So, and then of course, not only enough margin and volume. So you need to be doing volume so that you can generate the kind of cash flow to finance the inventory. So that's the part that
it's not that difficult for us, because while I gave you sort of where margins are at the top level, the actual cost of raw goods to the final product is very tiny. So, yes, if you're doing $1 million a year, you're only talking $50,000 to $80,000 of raw goods. So it's not that capital constraining on the balance sheet to do that. Yes, it does require some additional capital, but if you're doing the volume that requires that type of raw goods, capital's not a problem.
Yeah. Raw goods usually is a small. It's just a totally different business model. So it's not for everybody, but if you have, it's so many moving parts and so many things can go wrong, and the demand, planning the demand and everything. So I had another guest, and she actually is the founder of one of the inventory management software out there. And she presented that what they do is they set a min-max level for the inventory they need to carry. And they never, because the idea is never to run out of stock, but also never to overstock. So that's how she shared that, they assign a minimum and maximum stock level. They never go below 30 days worth, and they never go over 90 days worth.
Yep.
So that's how. And the other interesting thing that she shared was that this episode hasn't aired yet. It's not going to air for a while. So I'm
spoiler alert
out of the bag. And she said there's something called geo-ranking. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yeah, from a while back. Yes.
Yeah, tell us what geo-ranking is, because this is an interesting concept for our listeners.
Well, are you referring to the Amazon or Google, or which flavor
Amazon.
of geo-ranking? Yes. So I'm not as familiar with Amazon specific geo-ranking, but the concept of geo-ranking has been around for a long time. And so there is now, I mean, in all of Google, certainly, and I'm sure now in Amazon, there are metrics that talk about how you rank given a different geography. It's interesting because you actually can see the geo ranking for products even as you launch other countries. I found that so intriguing when one of our brands, we did about 20% of our volume in Canada and about 15% in Europe and the UK. And I found that really interesting that volumes were not at all the same across countries. And it's not the same within the US either. And so all of that geo-targeting in terms of advertising and search and all of that is certainly, that's got to be a part of Amazon's thought process as they're thinking about algorithms. Because, I mean, a great example for us. So we sold one of our prior brands, we did cutting board products. So cutting board oils and waxes and those sorts of things. And one of my favorite examples was gallons of cutting board oil, right? So it's like a gallon of cutting board oil is a lot of cutting board oil, right? You got to be pretty serious about your cutting boards, but probably restaurants and other folks like that were purchasing those. In the US, we literally sold 25% of the volume that we sold in Canada. Canada was 4x what we sold in the US.
Really? Oh my God.
Why? We still don't know. We're not sure why that is. But we also noticed that within that category, that you would find that rural America was a huge purchaser by comparison to urban, which was not the experience we had with other brands. You would see it. So I don't know if that's the geo-targeting she's talking about specifically, but in terms of both search and logistics and all of that, that's all got to be part of the algorithms moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you what this is about. It's geo-ranking, and it's all based on how much inventory you have available at Amazon. That's what it is. So apparently,
Sure.
The way it works is this. If you have a small amount of inventory, like you want to be so efficient and you don't want to keep too much inventory, or you don't have enough inventory so that you are turning over very frequently, so that you have only 2 weeks of inventory at any point in time, even though you are always in stock, you're not running out, but you are carrying small amount of inventory. Amazon does not like that, mainly because their orders are coming from all over the country. So therefore, they take your inventory and spread it across the country to their different distribution centers. And when you have small amount of inventory, it's no longer cost efficient for them to just spread, 2-3 pieces here, 10 pieces there. So as a result, they reduce your ranking in those distribution centers that don't have your inventory, so that your item does not show up, ranking high. That's what Amazon's application of geo-ranking is.
It makes sense because, and your guest you were talking about, right? That idea of having a month to 2 months minimum, we're always targeting 60 days. And a lot of that is specifically for the reason you mentioned. So right now, especially when we're launching a new brand, we see that like we sent our first shipment all went to California, right? And then Amazon's going to spread it all over. Well, what happens is if you're buying in California, you've got all kinds of great purchasing options today. If you're buying in New York, not so much. It's going to be a week or two before you get your product because they haven't distributed it yet, right? And until that network gets distributed and you have enough to spread out across there, that makes sense. So having that 1 to 2 months is important, although I will say it's incredibly ironic that the one thing that Amazon is supposed to do, which is make sure you have that distribution perfectly so you're not penalized, is the one thing they're now going to penalize you for if you don't have an overall inventory that they like. So I find that a little ironic, but not surprising.
Yeah. Well, there is one more thing. So the amount of inventory you carry at Amazon, because that's the only visibility they have. If you are an FBA seller, they know how many pieces they have in stock for you. And that's the potential number of orders they can get for it. So it's also in Amazon's interest to have your listing promoted, not only on Amazon, but outside Amazon. So therefore, they run paid ads. Amazon runs paid ads on Google. Well, what are they advertising? They're advertising the products that are more likely to drive sales and large amount of sales. Well, if you are carrying small amount of inventory, your listing will never get picked up in that Google advertising program. So you have to keep enough inventory to tell Amazon that you have plenty so that they can go promoting your items as well.
Well, I will tell you though, this is where micro categories is terrific because in a micro category, nobody has a lot of inventory, right? It's not there. So they are looking to make sure you're in stock. They're looking to make sure you have quality, but having done lots of micro categories, I can tell you that when you search on Google for our items, you're going to find them at the top. Why? Because we're the only ones with a valid presence on Amazon, right? We have full pages. Being focused, you can do videos, right? That you can't really do. Like we can do videos that you can use on 10 different products because we've shown you the entire solution, the whole process, right? So you get that scale with the videos and so forth. Because we have just these terrific quality listings, yes, we're always in stock and maybe we don't have the right amount in every single location, but because you're a micro category, they're going to show you because there's nobody else to show. And so we found that to be a huge advantage for us in terms of getting traffic. Amazon was a huge generator of traffic for us, even though we spent plenty on our own paid advertisings within Amazon. You could definitely tell a lot of that traffic came from their own generation out in Google. So micro categories protects you a little bit from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, as they say, small is beautiful because it's easy to manage. So it's, okay.
I'm only 5'8", so I appreciate that sentiment, Nick. So
5'8" is not small. What are you talking about? I'm
pretty small. I couldn't play basketball. Let's just say that.
Well, not everybody cares about basketball. So it's there's an interesting, there's the bell curve everybody wants. So where do you want to be in the bell curve? So you want to be on the right side in terms of success. So you want to be out. So but when it comes to emotional intelligence, you want to be right in the middle, right? Because that's when you are able to connect. So I think height is one of those things. I don't know. I think it's overrated. So Alan, what I want to talk about is your approach to keywords, because when you have such a narrow focus on a category, how do you go about finding the right search terms for you to associate with?
Yeah, so I mean, we do the basic things that everybody does, right? I mean, you grab your helium tools or whatever tools you've got to go do keyword searching. Um, but the one thing I would say is really different than the large categories is you don't give two rips about long tail keywords. They're completely useless. You've got the bandwidth to go after the head terms. You just don't need to chase every single keyword. And that just makes it a lot easier. There's the long-tailed keywords, it's just noise in a category that small. So when you're selling baseball cleaner, the search term is baseball cleaner, right? That's the term, people. You don't have to go out and, I mean, again, helium might give you a couple other great ones to look at, but if they don't have, I mean, if you're not looking at 300 to 500 searches for that term, it's just not worth your time, because you can afford the head terms that you absolutely could never afford in a major category. And I think that's a thing that's really different in these small categories, because historically you could never afford a head term in a big category and get an ACOS that's going to let you survive, right? But in a micro category, you can make that work. And you mentioned earlier, when you're that focused, you have great conversion, and we do. And so number one, the head terms aren't as expensive in big categories, and the conversion's better than big categories. Those two things are a recipe for success.
So you know what's going to happen? Those listening to this podcast, they will all rush to these micro categories, but there's so many of them, right? It doesn't matter.
We probably will never cross paths, even if they do.
Yeah. So definitely, this is definitely great. So can you share with us some numbers, like in your categories, and the price points that you mentioned are between 20 to 50? What kind of conversions are you achieving?
Well, in this, we just launched a new brand, so not much yet. Conversion is sort of interesting, and I'll tell you why. So in our prior one of our prior companies, our conversion rates were ridiculously high, but it's because I mentioned we created new products, and they were always like on the frequently bought with, and so you would have conversions with no views, and we had that a lot. So we had one particular product that was 50% conversion, but it's because like 80% of the purchases were frequently bought with and actually never had a view associated with the conversion. So conversion is a little bit tricky at Amazon sometimes when you're in these categories. We've historically ran somewhere between anywhere between 10 and 30% conversion rates, which is ridiculously high. And so we have not ever had a problem. What you don't have is you don't have the traffic, right? You just don't have the volume of traffic. But every visit, every unique visitor you get, the probability of conversion is extremely high. Even with, like, historically, like in a big category, if you use a head term, your likelihood of conversion is pretty low, actually, right? Because there's so many things that could be. In our categories, a head term is still, the highest converting term, just because it's very specific to what people are looking for. So you've connected the person who wants to buy with the product that they want to buy very quickly. And in our categories, when they look around at the competition, they're going to go, no, I'm fine. I'm going to go with this. So it's very, very high conversion rates.
Share with us how you get into that frequently bought together combination.
Wow, I wish I knew. I mean, really what happens is, that's just an Amazon algorithm, right? So we created, it was an applicators to put your cutting board oil onto your cutting board. And there was no such thing. So Paul Clark, my partner, he developed this thing. And so all of our competitors that sold oil, if you went to buy our competitors' oil, it was always, this oil is always bought with this applicator, which was ours, right? And so that's what happened. Like all of our competitors, and it's probably still that way today, all the competitors were actually showing on the frequently bought with, right, automatically by Amazon, this is what other customers buy with this product. And so that's how you end up getting on there. And I'm sure it's just a simple algorithm for Amazon to say every time this product's purchased, then it's purchased with this other item. And so they start surfacing those. So that's, that can happen in some of these small categories, especially when you're innovative. You innovate something new, they're going to buy it with it.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if that's something that you could engineer by using the product display ads under those that you could sell together with. But that would be a great advantage to have, your item being coupled with. I mean, if yours is a no-brainer, an applicator with the oil itself, that's a no-brainer. People are going to buy. So I'm assuming after a few times, Amazon algorithm would have picked it up and circulated all over. If it's not as obvious as yours, I wonder if there's a way you could somehow figure that out.
Well, again, you can tell you and I have been doing this a long time because I know exactly where your mind's going, and you're exactly right. We've done a lot of it. So we've done a lot of display ads and on our competitors' pages, and sometimes not even on our competitors, right? It's just on adjacencies. So if you're selling soapstone wax, right, you're going to be putting it on the person who's selling the soapstone, right? So you got to find those adjacencies with your products where it applies. And that's really what happened automatically with Amazon. But we were also doing plenty of that ourselves by having ads on our competitors. That is something that we're pretty aggressive about, is making sure that if our product not necessarily competes with a competitor directly item for item, but let's say, for example, let's say on the baseball, right? Somebody sells baseball oil. Well, I'm going to put a packet, I'm going to put a bundle on that person's page, because someone's going to go, well, he's got oil, but these guys got like 6 different things to solve my problem. That's where I'm going, right? And that's what happens in these smaller categories is you find all the individual components and you advertise your whole solution against that, and that does really well.
Yeah, definitely. And also, this is another advantage that you would have in a high inflation environment, because during high inflation time, people are looking for saving money. And so when they go by one, they see that, it's going to add up to a lot more, and you have your bundle there with everything they need. That's a great advantage.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. Well, this is great, Alan. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your beginnings. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up a poor farm boy in northern Michigan, not the Upper Peninsula. I'm not a Youper, for those who knows what that is. But yeah, I grew up in it's area called Traverse City area of the northern lower peninsula of Michigan on a farm. My dad was a farmer and a meat cutter, and just hard working lifestyle. And I knew from a pretty early age I was not wired for that. As did my dad. My dad used to always tell me when I was out working in the field. So we had a vegetable farm, right? And I was not the fastest. And I was small. I was a tiny kid. And my dad used to tell me, he'd say, every good ship needs an anchor. And that's what he told me when I was working out there. So no, I was not wired for that. But I have a great all my family still lives back there. All my siblings are back there. That's sort of the life. But I tell you learn a lot working on a farm. There's something about growing up in those circumstances that just translates to life really well. My dad always told me, he's like, if you do things that nobody else wants to do, you'll always have employment. That's what my dad always told me. And it is so true. And we do that here with Amazon, right? We do stuff that other people don't want to do because it's really hard, right? We don't take the easy way. We could definitely make more money an easier way on Amazon, but we don't. We like to do stuff that's hard because then other people don't want to do it. It's more defensible. It's more satisfying. And I think that was part of my growing up. But yeah, so I grew up there, and then once I turned 18, basically went west until I hit water. And so you're in the Pacific Northwest.
Was that running away? Was that running away or curiosity?
No, actually, I went to school for a year at Brigham Young University in Utah, and actually did a church mission in Mexico for a couple of years. Came back, and shortly after married my wife. Her and I have been married for about 35 years now, and she is from the Pacific Northwest. So the reason we are here should be obvious to all the listeners now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I understand hard work. I understand the culture, and I definitely. I mean, my standard question is, or I should say, my standard curiosity is, what was it that you experienced as a kid that led you to what you're doing today? And you already said it. You said, your dad told you that
Yeah.
if you do the things that nobody wants to do, then you'll always have employment. And that's exactly what you're doing. But what I don't yet know is that entrepreneurial approach. When was it that, as a kid, that you started dabbling in entrepreneurial affairs, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I reflect back on that question, my dad was like the best entrepreneur example I could have ever asked for. My dad, he must have done 100 different types of jobs as I was a kid, right? Yes, he was a farmer. Yes, he was a meat cutter. But we did every odd job you can possibly imagine. My first job as a kid was digging graves at a cemetery. My dad mowed a few cemeteries in the area, right? So we would do all kinds of things in the meat cutting realm, different small businesses. And we'd go to the farmer's market, right? And all of that just is very entrepreneurial. And that, I know that's where I got sort of that core understanding of it. My passion, this will seem disconnected because it is. As a kid, all your friends, they want to be firemen, firefighters, policemen, whatever, right? I had two desires. My number one is I wanted to be a game show host. That was my number one thing that I wanted to be. And the second one was I wanted to build robots. So those were my two. I was a nerd at heart. I loved electronics. I went to a electronics vocational school for a while. And but I loved game shows. It was just a super fun passion of mine as a kid watching those. And so I never actually got off on the game show circuit. Drew Carey took over for me when Bob Barker stepped aside. But no, in terms of I really grabbed onto technology, and I worked in the grocery industry for 13 years, most of that in the technology side of it. So I love the brick and mortar technology that was used when loyalty marketing systems were just coming online. I was a part of that, right? When electronic benefits and payment processing was just coming online. I was right in the middle of all that as it was happening. And then when the internet came forward, I launched some networks inside of a very large wholesale organization here in the United States. And I immediately just gravitated and eventually ended up in e-commerce, not surprising given the retail side that I love so much. And the technology part of it just allowed me to invent. It allowed me to try and test. And it's just a space I really love and get excited about every day.
Yeah, I mean, technology is a big game changer. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and if you think back 30 years is a long time. But if you think about everything that's happened in the last 30 years, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, I still remember the days where those cell phones, the first cell phones. And in fact, the funniest part was, if you remember when the cell phones came out and then suddenly everybody has one. At the time I was living in London, and Ericsson came out with the best cell phone. It was better than anything else. And the reason that made it the best was it was so small. And then this trend started to make the phones smaller and smaller and smaller. And I never forget, there was actually an SNL sketch. Will Ferrell, he's playing this German guy, and the phone rings, and then he's talking to somebody in a formal setting, and then suddenly he says, "Oh, hold on a minute, my phone is ringing," and then he takes this phone out, and then he puts it right next to his ear with his fingers. I mean, those were now there's no more cell phones. There's computers masquerading around as a phone, and the internet, of course, is a whole different thing. So, but having that focus always makes it fun. So, Alan, this was a great conversation. So, tell us, how can people reach you? Because I'm sure that, I mean, you have applied the Zulu principle. So, you have not only been doing this for a long time, but also you have now become a speaker on micro categories. So I'm sure people will want to reach out. So how can people reach you?
Well, obviously, the easiest way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You'll see me there. People can connect to me there. I'm pretty open about that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way. Just look for Alan Blackford on LinkedIn. You'll see a picture of me that looks, kind of take the headphones off, looks similar to the face you're seeing today. And I'd be happy to connect with you that way.
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. It's a great conversation, and good luck with your launch. And I'm sure it will do very well.
Appreciate it, Nick. Thanks for having me.
And thank you. And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you in the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.